So I recently met with an attorney who is interested in a whole life insurance policy. High cash value is his goal, but he had some excellent questions. He knew what he wanted with respect to the dollar amount he wants to fund a policy with, the number of years he wants to fund a policy for, and then what he wants to use the policy for, specifically real estate. That's his interest. But he came to us with an outline of, here's what I'm interested in with a whole life insurance policy. I've done my research. I understand how it works. I do have some questions about different companies. I want a lot of payment flexibility. So he had some questions, but again, he knows what he's looking for. It was evident that he had done the research before reaching out, which did make the conversation extremely productive when we connected. So what we're going to go through in today's video is what he's looking at, but then we're going to go through the questions he asked, because the questions he asked are questions that are asked by a lot of individuals, or they're the type of question that we hear and think, I wish I would have asked that, but I wish I had someone there sitting next to me that could have asked the question for me. So hopefully you find these questions that he asked informative. Let's get on into it and have some fun. So again, we've got an attorney, currently 40 years old, interested in a whole life insurance policy. Cash accumulation is the goal. What he's interested in, and he sent this in his initial email, was $300,000 per year that he'd like to fund a policy with between 7 and 10 years. He actually started with a dollar amount, $250 to $300K per year, but he had narrowed things down to what he wanted to do with respect to the funding and number of years. And he even said, I don't really see myself wanting to fund beyond 10 years. And even if he does, he'd look at a new policy at that point in time. His plan with respect to using the policy is for real estate. This is something he's very good at. He's very good at his job, but this is fun to him and generates additional income. So, company choice. We looked at 2 of the 4 major mutual companies that offer a lot of flexibility. A note that I did not include here that he emphasized in his first email to us was, flexibility is very important to me. Meaning, he wants the ability to fund $300,000 per year, but he does not want to be on the hook for that. So think of it this way. You're interested in a whole life insurance policy. You see how you can really maximize the cash value if the agent sets it up correctly for you. You see, okay, here's the dollar amount that I'd like to pay in, $300,000 per year. But what happens if I have a down year and I can't fund it with $300,000 on my due date in January or June, whenever your due date is? You don't have the $300K then, but maybe you've got it 6 months later. Depending on the company that you choose, you may be able to add the funds later, or you might have to wait until your next premium due date. So having information on company selection and product flexibility can really help you make the right decision, especially when you're looking at large dollar amounts. So MassMutual and Guardian, he can accomplish what he wants to do, $300K per year for 10 years with both of those companies. Brief overview. MassMutual, with the way that we designed the product, will allow him to adjust his payments 1 time per year, every year, provided that adjustment fall on his policy anniversary date, which is a fancy word for the premium due date. So if the policy anniversary date, the due date, is June 1st, then June 1st of every year when his premium is due, he can scale that payment up and down. Guardian will allow him to commit to the minimum premium only, which will be approximately $30,000, 10% of the $300K, $30,000 per year. So call it June 1st. He pays the $30K. He can even pay that over 12 months if he'd like. And then when it comes to adding more money into the policy through the PUA rider, he can do that 100% at discretion. So he's got a bit more flexibility there, which he did admit is very, very attractive. But he had some questions on Guardian. So what we're going to look at in this video specifically is the payment flexibility. First, we'll look at the $300K per year for 10-year option with MassMutual and Guardian. Then we'll look at a specific request he made, which is catch-up payments. What he wanted to see, and he requested this particularly with MassMutual, but you'll see that he can do it with MassMutual and Guardian, is what's it look like if I plan to do this, but I end up doing something like this because my income fluctuates. And look at this, year 4, if I make a big catch-up payment and make up for lost time, is that actually possible? I'd like to see it on an illustration, not just hear about it. So that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to look at some numbers shortly. And then in our next video, we're going to break these up because this is a topic in itself. His question about Guardian was this: Guardian's loan treatment for at least the first 10 years is direct recognition. So we wanted to see, how does that direct recognition treatment impact policy loans? So we're going to study that exactly in our next video. So with that said, let's take a look at this guy, policy flexibility. So MassMutual and Guardian. He wants to see this scenario here. Before we look at this though, we'll look at the $300K per year for 10 years because this is what he wants. This is his plan and what he's fairly confident that he'll be able to do. So we'll begin just with illustrations with Guardian and Mass so we can see exactly where the money is going. That's the most important piece here. And again, we've got an educated individual that wants to make sure everything's set up correctly. So here we've got a Guardian policy. We see the net after-tax outlay, $300K per year for 10 years. Okay, this is a max funded policy. Looks fantastic when we look at the cash value performance. First year, he pays in $300,000. What shows up in cash value? $263,000. Take note of the next year. $300,000 is illustrated to be paid in. If he was earning 0%, so if you've got 263 and you add 300 to it, what would it be the next year? It would be 563, 267. But what is the value here? 569, 610, which means he got his $300K back and a little bit more from the insurance company. Dividends and interest are kicking in. He's getting more back each year. By year 4, at $300K per year, he's paid in a total of what? $1.2 million. His cash value is $1.2 million, a little bit more in this particular case. This particular illustration is assuming the indexed rider is at 100%. So he's got 100% of his cash value tied to the S&P 500 index. However, this is a rider. You're going to see options that we looked at with it at 100%, with it at 0%, which is the basic dividend rate, and then also only the guarantees. Why don't we look at that? And then we'll look at MassMutual. So let's take a look. So here we go. Looks like a lot. I promise it's not. On the far right, here's what we just looked at. So this is all the exact same policy. What we've got here are really just different assumptions, meaning different crediting rate assumptions here. On the right, we've got the indexed rider values, which take the past 20, maybe the past 25 years, but I'm quite certain, I think it's the past 20 years of market history. If the market repeats itself, the past 20 years with the S&P 500, if it repeats itself and our cap rate or nothing like that adjusts, here's what you should have. Completely hypothetical. I would never state this is what you're going to have. It's not a good idea in my opinion. It's a good hypothetical assumption, but if you're going with the indexed rider strategy, you definitely want to track it year over year, just like you would the dividend performance and such. But it does provide a little bit more earning potential with the whole life insurance policy. That's the illustration we just looked at. There's the break-even point in year 4. 1.2 in, 1.216. Here's the annual internal rate of return, which isolates the net growth rate year over year. And then here's the average internal rate of return, which will say over 10 years, I've paid in $3 million. I've got 3.6, which is an average of 3.39. Side note, when you're looking at the average internal rate of return, it's going to factor in each year the payment is made. Meaning if you just throw in a compound interest calculator, $3 million in year 1, and calculate by year 10, your value's $3.6 million, you're going to have a different return than what you see here. So what we've got to always take into consideration with the average internal rate of return is the year I make the payment is when it's going to begin earning dividends and such, or that's how that return is calculated. I've got to factor in the time is my point there. With all that said, That's the indexed feature. Here's the basic dividend rate, which is 5.75% for 2023. And this is Guardian's L95 product with their 5% PUA fee, which will give you more cash value up front on a non-guaranteed basis, but based on the non-guarantees, it'll be weaker long-term. So if we looked at their 10% PUA fee, with the dividend illustration and the indexed rider illustration, you would see stronger IRRs with both of these examples. Guaranteed values assumes no dividends are ever paid. It also assumes that the maximum allowable charges for the term insurance rider that's attached is assessed to the policy. So something important to note here, or important to correct here, because I made a mistake, I've got highlighted in yellow the break-even point. That's what the yellow highlighting means there. However, when I look at the guarantees, the break-even point here is between years 7 and 8. So it is delayed when I look at the worst-case scenario. That's something he wanted to see. And frankly, it's something I like to show as well. But there we go, based on the guarantees. So now he sees the Guardian product with different assumptions. What I will state, and this is my personal experience with Guardian, we've seen over the past several years, their dividend values, what we see on the illustration, we've seen the actual values almost spot on with the illustrated values, assuming that the policyholder funded his or her policy in the same manner it was illustrated. Meaning if this was on the illustration and they did exactly this, 300K at the beginning of each year, we've seen that performance almost spot on with slight dividend adjustments having an impact. But the dividend has not changed that much. And we've seen the actual performance follow the illustrations very, very closely, which is really nice. So the dividend will change and the actual results will differ, but just from our experience in tracking performance, we've had good results, is my point there. So that's the Guardian illustration. Let's take a look at the MassMutual illustration, shall we? So here's the 10-year funding scenario. Annual outlay, 300K per year for 10 years. Here's your premium at 10%. Then we've got term riders, PUA riders, everything to juice the cash value. By year 4, you've paid in $1.2 million, cash value over 1.2. Very comparable to what we saw in the Guardian illustration. Now the death benefit here, $4.3 million in change, kind of an oddball figure. Where we came up with that is this guy here. The death benefit has a direct relationship to the MEC limit at just over $300,000. But what was his question? After he saw the examples with 300K per year paid into the policy for 10 years, his question was what? I'd like to see flexibility. First year, 300K. I can do that. I'm good with it. But what if things slow down on my end and I'm able to get a lesser dollar amount into the policy, and then in year 4, get that $600,000 in? Let's look at exactly that. So the next illustration, take note of the first year. Your cash value is $270,083. Your death benefit is 4.353. The next illustration, do you notice anything different when you look at those two columns? In the first year, that is. No, nothing at all. That's because this is the same and this is the same. The next year, something is different. The funding is $100,000, then up to $200,000, then up to $600,000, then down to $100,000. So this is exactly what he wanted to see. Now, again, we've got a sharp guy, technical, asks a lot of questions. If I'm him, I'm going to ask, what does this mean, this annual surrender column? What this represents is the base premium plus the term insurance rider, the renewable term rider that is, that's still due, but he's not paying it. The policy is paying for itself. What I also threw in there is a what if scenario. What if after this, you wanted to continue payments at the 300K per year? Is that possible? Yes, it is. Using the proper riders and such is critical here, which we've got a 1-year term rider, we've got Lister and Ailer. All companies have different rules. I don't want to be overly technical in this video. So let's look at a side-by-side comparison of that, because this is meant, the purpose of what I just went through there in this Excel workbook too, is to demonstrate the flexibility. The question he had, is it flexible? Can I really vary my payments as time passes? So here we go. Here's my 10-pay policy. Here's the original plan. Now show me with the exact same policy. I do not want the design to be different, because once I start, I want to know that I can make adjustments with that policy and I'm not locked in to whatever that illustration showed, or I've got additional restrictions or anything like that. Show me what it looks like if I adjust my payments. So there's the request, beginning year 2, highlighted in orange. What happens to the performance? Very comparable when we look at the break even, isn't it? Between years 4 and 5. We've got the internal rates of return as well, both the annual and average. They're comparable if we want to look at that. We could also delete them if there's too many columns here. You can include those on the illustration anyway. Then we've got this, which is the same thing, but then scaling payments back up. This is something I really like, because if he does this, says, man, I reduced my funding, now I'm ready, or now I'd like to scale my payments back up, or maybe even make another large catch-up payment, kind of like year 4 with the $600K payment. I want to plow more funds into it. Does it make sense to take out a new policy? Should I do that, especially if I'm being recommended it? No. Well, depends if you want more life insurance, but if cash value is your goal, look at this. Your policy is humming now when we look at the internal rate of return. If you start a new policy, you've got to go through the early years again, meaning you'll take a hit on your money, a loss. Versus this, if you add more money to it, you're over the primary expenses in the early years. It's compounding, so you're going to see that payment come back and a lot more on top of it. So if we have the ability to add more money into an existing policy, that often puts us in a nice position. Now, taking out new policies is not a bad thing. We've got a lot of individuals that do that. I've got multiple policies because they have multiple advantages. If I want more mech space, or perhaps my original plan was to heavily fund a policy for 5 to 7 years, then go reduced paid up, and then start a new one because I liked what the numbers displayed. Depends on my situation. It does. But at the same time, having this awareness, one of my favorite words, awareness, is key. Because if I just start a new policy here and I wasn't aware that I could add more or scale my payments back up to the original amount that I planned to pay in, it's like, oh, well, if I could have done that, I would have done that. But anyway, point is to demonstrate the flexibility of the policy, and that we looked at with MassMutual. And I'll say this again, what we just looked at with those illustrations, he can do that with both of those products, with how they are presently designed. So both the illustrations, you can do the same thing there. The only difference is you can commit to the minimum premium. It'd be the premium and the term rider cost. So in this example, it was a little bit higher than $30,000. It was about $31,000, but he can commit just to that and add additional PUAs on an unscheduled basis, meaning he does it whenever he wants. Guardian's very accommodating when it comes to unscheduled PUA payments. But he can do what we saw with both. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please let us know if you did. Feel free to leave a comment below. Let us know if you have any questions, if you prefer a company or product or one of the options you saw in this video. And as always, I hope this helps. Thanks so much. Hey guys, Steve here with IBC Global. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you're interested in a whole life insurance policy and you'd like to work with our company in setting it up, please visit our website, ibcglobalinc.com. We would love to work with you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, I hope this helps.